This is episode 74 with Josh Haynam.
Welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast, the show that empowers you to become the hero of your life's journey. With your host, Brian Tier.
Success is more about habits than skills or luck. What is up, guys and girls? Welcome back to another episode of the Quarter Life Comeback Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Brian Tier, and those were the wise words of this week's guest of episode 74, Josh Haynam. Now, in case you haven't heard of him, Josh is an entrepreneur and founder of Interact, which is an online tool for creating engaging quizzes that generate email leads for businesses. Now, having started his first company at 15 years old installing lawn, Josh got addicted to entrepreneurship and the idea of creating something out of nothing, including everything from pitching clients, getting business, and creating value. After running several businesses throughout high school and college, Josh and his friend landed on the idea for Interact in their junior year. But they were too early in the market, and the first 3 years of running their company was a real struggle. Despite these challenging times, Josh never gave up hope, knowing that his idea worked, and if they could just stay alive, then at some point, people would catch on. They did. Halfway through 2017, they doubled their customers and are on track to double them again by the end of the year. All right, enough about that. Let's get into this week's episode. And in this episode, you're going to learn the biggest challenge faced by new entrepreneurs and how you can handle it. You're going to learn the 2 steps to land your first client when you don't have a track record or success stories yet. You're going to learn how to know if it's time to quit or to keep going, how to use entrepreneurship to enhance your life rather than compromise it, what to do when you don't know where to start, how to choose between multiple ideas, and I feel you guys on this one, and the true key to success. And here's a hint, it's not about talent or skills. As always, you can get the links and resources we mentioned in the show at briantier.com/074. But for now, guys, let's go hang out with Josh. Welcome back, everyone, and a big welcome to today's guest. I'm really excited to be speaking to the birthday boy, Josh Haynam. Josh, welcome to the Quarter Life Comeback.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come and speak to us today on your birthday, no less. But for people who don't know who and what it is that you do, why don't you fill us in and tell us your Quarter Life story?
Yeah, definitely. So it's perfect timing because I'm actually turning 25 today. So I started a company called Interact 4 years ago, almost exactly, August of 2013. Since then, we have started to work with 35,000 companies, including companies like the American Red Cross, the United Nations, Home Depot, Caterpillar Construction, Lush Cosmetics, and the list literally just goes on and on. I think last week we signed up like InBev, Caterpillar, and like a few other giant brands. So it's been nuts. The company itself is a platform for creating quizzes like the ones that you see on your Facebook feed all the time, except for in a business use case. So not just for fun, but for actual results and marketing for companies. So that's what it is. Our team has grown up to 8 people at this point, which is unfathomable from where we started. And that's really all the good stuff, but there's a lot more behind how, it got from 2 guys hacking away in a college room tucked away in the basically attic of a building to where we are now. So love to dive into that.
Yeah, and it's so cool. Like you shared some numbers with me via email about how you guys have grown, especially this year, which is amazing. And I'm sure we can get into that later on. And you also shared right before we got on this call that you can do a lot of interviews and talks and stuff on marketing, but I think it'll be really cool to get the sort of behind the scenes in the trenches of what it really takes to build a big business like this. I think it's super cool how you guys have grown, like you said, from like a dorm room project to now employing 8 people, having a team of 8. So why don't you start by taking us back to kind of when the whole entrepreneurial kick started? I know you said at 15 you were installing lawns, and what was it about starting your own company or your own little business that really grabbed you?
Yeah. So it was at 15 that I was 15. I grew up in the Central Valley in California, which is the closest correlation I can find is really, and this is going to sound super extreme, but like the Dust Bowl back in the day, because the Central Valley has been hit really hard by the economic recession and big farms taking over little farms. And so I turned 15 right in the height of the 2007-2008 recession, and no one wanted to hire me. I tried to work at McDonald's. I tried to work at Burger King, Subway, like literally anywhere, nothing. And so I was faced with a choice to either kind of give up or find a different way to get things done. And I decided to go out and pitch my services with the one thing I actually knew how to do, which was install lawns and maintain lawns. And I put up some Craigslist ads and got a hit from a guy. I went out and did an estimate, and it was quite the story because the guy was actually a UFC fighter, and he had installed a beach in his backyard for his toddler son. So when I say that, I literally mean he dumped like 10 tons of sand into his backyard. And all of a sudden, his kid decided. His kid decided he didn't want a beach anymore, and now he wanted grass. So of course, I'm like, yeah, we can do that job, like $1,000, which to me at the time was a massive amount of money, right? Like I'm 15, like I had a driver's permit. I was driving around an old beat up pickup truck. I was like, that's a huge amount of money. And the guy's like, okay, I'm in. And later we learned that the next closest estimate was like 4,000. So we like left a ton of money on the table. But we signed up to do this job. It was absolutely miserable, basically shoveling sand for 5 days straight in 110-degree weather while a UFC fighter was sitting there watching us, making sure we didn't mess up. So high stress, not a lot of fun, and quite literally moving tons of dirt. And then the second part of the job is installing the grass, which is also tons of sod, which is, just rolls of grass that weigh about 60 pounds each. And it took us, I hired a couple of friends. It took us about a week to make that $1,000 between three of us, but it was the most fulfilling thing in terms of work that I had ever done. Being able to see that process from start to finish, despite how absolutely miserable the entire thing was, I was hooked. And from there, I did the same thing. I would go out and pitch installing these lawns, undercut the price by a massive amount because we were 15, 16 years old, and any amount of money was great. And just basically work ourselves really hard, and it was so fulfilling. I remember like going out to pizza afterwards, and we would just feel so proud, even though we had just made $300 in a week working 12 hours a day hauling sand. We just felt so great about what we had done. And that's where I got hooked. It was in that. And from there, I moved on. I actually threw my back out at 16 and a half, 17, and really couldn't do that work anymore. And lucked into my next business, which was buying and selling used laptops, and did that for about 3 years. I went through probably 600 or 700 laptops, buying them, repairing them, and reselling them through Craigslist and eBay. And during that time got super good at phone calls because every one of those laptops took at least a few conversations. So I quite literally had thousands of sales conversations selling laptops through those years. So that was my second business and really kind of got me up to speed with sales and marketing and branding and all that kind of stuff and presentation of those computers. And then after that, I had to stop that business because I was failing out of college, literally. Went to college. I was still running my laptop business. And I remember like taking calls and leaving class all the time, or just not even going to class. I remember I went to one class for the first time like 6 weeks into a 10-week class. Because the first 6 weeks there was something going on with my business and I never made it, and I got the lowest score on the midterm exam and ended up failing the class. But Yeah, so I had to stop doing that for a little while. And while I was in that lull, I met a few friends that were also interested in entrepreneurial stuff, and we banded together and created a small agency where we would go out and pitch websites, kind of like I used to pitch installing lawns, but websites. And we did that for a while. And through that business, we actually came across the idea for building out a quiz platform. And that's where this current company was born from. And that takes us through to the present.
Yeah, that's so cool. Two things that really stood out to me. The first, like, little part of the story that I loved was how you couldn't get a job at like McDonald's or any of those kind of places. So you just created your own thing. And, you know, it ended up teaching you skills you wouldn't have learned just serving food. And then the other was how, like I just kind of hinted at, is that every job you took on kind of taught you skills that you could then carry forward into your next thing. And I think there's a really big lesson in that. I think so often now there's this kind of pressure to kind of nail the right idea right at the beginning. But actually those kind of stepping stone jobs are what teach you the skills that you're going to need when you do hit that big idea. So that was really cool hearing that. It doesn't sound like you had like that many failed business ideas. But what were some of the sort of big challenges and obstacles you faced along the way?
Yeah, I mean, you know, fortunately, I've been able to kind of turn everything into at least a moderate success. I mean, I wouldn't say that the first things that I did were really successful, but I would say, you know, the biggest challenges that I've faced are really in starting something from nothing. And that's, you know, obvious in some sense, but at the same time, when you're going from 0 to 1, as people put it, like you have 0 customers and you're trying to get 1, that is really, really hard. And there's no trust built up. Nobody cares about what you do, or, you know, they have no idea of your skills or anything like that. Whereas like going from 1 to 2 or from 100 to 1,000 is a much different prospect. You can fall back on the references that you have, and like the stage that my company's at now, it's like, you know, you can point out literally tens of thousands of examples of successes and say, you know, look at this. So getting from that 0 to 1, I remember distinctly in all of my businesses what that step was like. And with the lawns, I told the story of the UFC fighter and the beach backyard. That was my 0 to 1. With my laptop business, it was literally spending, I want to say I spent 3 days straight, like 72 hours, trying to figure out how to refactor a laptop, like reinstall the operating system successfully. And I like remember distinctly staying up for that long before I figured it out. I think I had like 7 or 8 computers up and running. They were all running tests at the same time, because that was the hurdle, right, between, you know, I had bought this laptop that needed to be fixed, and in order to make my first sale, I needed to fix it. And so I remember very, very clearly that 72 hours straight of trying to solve that one problem. And then with my current business, it's been taken to a whole other level. It was 9 months before we got our first paying customer, and then another almost 3 years before we found a repeatable acquisition model. So it's just been blown to a whole new proportion, and it's a different challenge because my current business is very, very innovative and very new. We're not selling laptops. We're not fixing lawns. Those are things that, you know, have been done for a long time. What we're doing is brand new, and all of our customers have never done it before. And so the timelines for things are blown out sometimes, and it really does make me fall back on, like you said, those skills that I picked up in my first businesses, and particularly with perseverance and knowing that there is a light at the end of the tunnel if you keep pushing through and you keep listening to what's possible, you can break through. And that's what really allowed me to keep going during that 9 months when it was like, well, are we ever going to actually get somebody to pay for this? And then for the next basically 3 years after that, like, how do we figure out how to scale this thing up? Like it's made an impact, but it's not going the way that we want it to.
Yeah.
What are we supposed to do? And so being able to fall back on those previous experience was paramount.
Yeah, and we spoke via email about this theme of like grit and just not giving up, which I'm sure we'll get to later on. But you mentioned something that was really interesting to me, and that was the whole concept of 0 to 1. And then, you know, like 1 to 2 and 10 to 100, 100 to 1,000 becomes a lot easier. But if someone's standing at their 0 right now, what's some advice you could give them on, like, you know, landing a client when they don't have testimonials or success stories or referrals or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with identifying an issue, and particularly identifying a unique solution to that issue. So like with my laptop company, I'll go back to that one. It's like, you know, people have these old laptops they need to get rid of, and other people are trying to buy old laptops, but they don't really trust anybody because it's like, well, is this actually good or not? And so there's a bridge there between these people that need to get rid of something and some people that need to buy something, and they are not good at communicating with one another. So you can be the middleman, talk to the person that's trying to get rid of a computer, you know, explain to them that you can, you know, give them a fair price for it and then fix it up, and then explain how it's been fixed up and how it's been, you know, refactored and it's good as new to the person that's trying to find one on the buying side, and then bridge that gap. So, you know, I identified that, you know, people have this problem with selling things. Like they just don't like doing it. It's a pain. It's frustrating, all that kind of stuff. And then on the same equation, other side of the equation, there is the factor where, you know, people want to buy things that are used because it's cheaper, but they don't trust anything. So that's where there's an opportunity. And then with my current business, with the quizzes, everybody's looking for more email subscribers. Like everybody wants that. And I knew that because I was working with business owners all the time, building them entire websites that they would pay $30,000, $40,000 for. And all they wanted was the email subscribers that website was going to allow them to collect. Mm-hmm. And then within that, I came across one of these quizzes, and this was way before anybody else was doing quizzes, that was like really innovative. And then we built one for a client, and we recognized that this works. So we had a very unique view into what the problem was. The problem being that business owners want to get email subscribers, but there's not really great ways to do that are new and interesting. And then because we knew that problem existed, we came across a solution that was new and unique. And so we were able to do that. We were able to build it out and prove that it worked, and then go from there and find another client that was willing to pay for it. So I think it's really about having a very good listening ear into what the actual problems are, and then being willing to put in the time and the effort to explore solutions and, you know, do the research and talk to people to find solutions to those problems. And since you have already gotten that window into what the issues are, when you do find a solution, you know it's going to work. And those two things together, it's kind of nebulous, but that's what really allows you to speak at the customer's level and speak to them in terms that they understand, which is what allows you to then go out and sell something, even if you have not established a name for yourself.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head with, like, being an entrepreneur. There's identifying a problem people have and then coming up with a unique solution. But do you think that that's something that anyone can do? So essentially, I guess I'm asking, like, can anyone become an entrepreneur, or does it take a certain type of person?
You know, at this point, I do think it takes a certain type of person, and I have learned enough to know that I'm often wrong. But I think that to be an entrepreneur, you have to be willing to go far beyond what's normal in terms of sticking out an idea. And, you know, lately, since we've been having a ton of success with my current company, people have been asking me, like, what is it? Like, how did that happen? Like, you know, 30 years down the road from where you are, and I'm not on, I'm not having that kind of success. Like, what did you do? And all I can point to is just not giving up, like this uncanny ability to continue pushing through when it just doesn't look like the outcome is going to be good. It doesn't look like there's a light at the end of the tunnel, or that success is even a possibility. And all the signs are kind of pointing to this is just not a great business. This is not a good call. And being able to know when that's the right thing to do and when it's not the right thing to do, but at the same time, I just don't think that's for everyone. And that's not something that everybody should even aspire to, because if you don't have the type of personality that enjoys really, really taking things almost too far in a business sense, then you're going to hate it, because there will be so much time and so many situations where it just seems like the outcome is not going to happen. And I just don't think that most of the population has any desire to put themselves in those types of scenarios. Like, you don't have to. You can easily go, find a job where everything is kind of laid out, and you can utilize your people skills, you can utilize your organizational skills, your critical thinking skills from day one, and just jump into an existing role and have success with that, and never have to worry about kind of how things got set up in the first place and where stuff came from. And that's perfect. Those people are needed in those roles. And so, yeah, I really do think it's a very distinct type of personality that even wants to do this.
Yeah, I've got the biggest smile on my face. When I quit my corporate job it's about 3 years ago now, I didn't know what the next couple of years would look like, or what I would be doing. But the only thing that I did know is that I just wasn't going to give up. And I think, like, the thing that you end up doing might change along the way. Like, it might take on different forms along the way. But I think that is the biggest thing, is like, as long as you have this attitude that I'm just not going to quit no matter what happens, I think something will work out. Yeah, I love how, again, this comes back to like skills you develop along the way. If the worst case scenario, you had to go back and get another job, the skills that you've learned could land you in a job that you wouldn't have had access to before. So it's cool how everything kind of comes back and leads you where it's supposed to, I think. You mentioned like not giving up, and I'm wondering at the same time, is there a point in time where it is the right decision to throw in the towel? And, determining if it's too early to give up yet, or if this idea just doesn't have any legs to run on. How do you see that distinction?
Yeah, and that's a really good question.
And I get you might not be the right person to ask because of your grit and determination, but I'm sure people listening are wondering, like, well, I've had this idea, it's not really getting traction. How do I know when I need to kind of move on and try something else, or if I should just keep at it?
Yeah, and I think the thing to do is take a step back and not make it about the idea, not even make it about the business, but make it about how is this pursuit affecting you? Because there's this quote that says, if you work at something long enough and hard enough, you will achieve it. And I think what's important when you are questioning whether it's worth it to go forward is, do I actually want what I set out to achieve? And what I mean by that is that you're going to have to make sacrifices along the way. You're going to have to make choices as to what you spend your time on and who you spend your time with if you want to persevere and get through to that end goal, whatever it is, of building a company, of creating a product, of inventing something, whatever it is. If you continue working towards that and let other things kind of fall away, then you can make it. But the question to ask yourself is how is that pursuit affecting me? Are my relationships with friends and family and significant others falling off because I am pushing towards this with such vigor? Is my personal development suffering? How's my health? How am I sleeping? Like, how content am I with this pursuit? And what you really have to do is realize that a lot of getting to a goal is the journey. It's not the goal itself that actually affects you. It's how the journey affects you. So if you're halfway through, and you don't know it's halfway through because you never know until you get to the goal, but if you're halfway through a 5-year stint, you're 2.5 years in, and you look around and you're like, dang, like things could definitely be way better with this company, but my health is great. I have really good habits. You know, my relationships with friends and family are strong. I'm pouring into those around me. My attitude is awesome. I'm getting, coaching. I'm getting advice. I'm getting counseling. I'm working on myself. And I feel like I am progressing both in my skills and in my mental ability to cope with hard things, a business being a hard thing. That's amazing. But if you look around and you're like, I'm working 16 hours a day, I'm not eating healthy, I'm gaining weight, I'm not exercising, a lot of my relationships have fallen off, and I'm just not happy, then that's where you really should consider stopping and doing something else, because things can affect you differently. And, in my own journey, this has been a huge point, and a huge part of the reason that I was able to push through is that I, working with coaches and counselors and things like that, I've been able to kind of corral this idea that I'm working on, this company that I'm working on, and utilize it to actually improve other areas of my life rather than sacrificing other areas of my life. So that's what I would say, is to look at how is this actually changing me as a person, and is it changing me for the better? If so, definitely stick with it. If not, I would take a really hard look at whether it's worth continuing with.
That was really helpful. I love that distinction of like using it to improve the other areas rather than be to their detriment. And I was going to ask you about your kind of daily routine and healthy habits and stuff, but I don't think we need to get into that. What I'd love to ask is two different situations. The first is your kind of advice for someone who has an idea but no idea where to start. So they have an idea for a business, but they're not quite sure how to get started with that.
Yeah, I think that if you have an idea, first of all, I think that ideas are fairly useless, and I'm just going to put that word out there because I want it to be overly strong, because I have a viscerally negative reaction to people that are all about their ideas. When I started this current company, I literally called marketing people who could very well have built a company based on the idea. They could have built their own software and, created a quiz application and all these things. But I called them to ask their thoughts on it, not worried about, are they going to build the software for this and compete with me? Because if they're going to, they're going to anyways. Like, it doesn't matter whether you tell them the idea or not. So I think when you have a concept, you need to do two things. You need to immerse yourself in the market so that you know whether it's a good idea. So you need to personally go talk to people who would use the product or service that you're thinking about creating and ask them what they think and get their reaction to it. And then you also need to network with people who are in the market. So if you're working in marketing, you need to go to marketing consultants, marketing influencers, and ask them, what do you think of this concept? And are you seeing anything like this done effectively? Do you think this could work? All that kind of stuff, and just get their unfiltered opinions. And people will push back and be like, oh, well, someone's going to steal my idea. They're going to steal your idea anyways if it works. Like, at this point, we quite literally have 6 direct copycats of our product, and we're not going to do anything about it other than outcompete them, but it's going to happen. So don't ever say that somebody's going to steal your idea. Go out and talk to as many people as possible who are your target customers and who are influencing your target customers, and ask them for their feedback and what they would think of a tool or service like the one that you're planning on creating.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think it's like, having that mindset of if I tell people about this, someone's going to steal it. That's coming from a very scarce place. Whereas like your competitors probably want you to succeed, because it then shows them that there's opportunity for them to create something else. The other scenario that I wanted to kind of play with was, if there's people listening that maybe have a lot of ideas but aren't sure which one to pick or how to choose which one to kind of experiment with.
Yeah, I think, when on the topic of ideas, like, if you're going to start something and have it be a real thing, the actual timeline, if you look at historical data of companies that are successful, is a minimum of 10 years. And you look around at publications and, TechCrunch and whatever, and they'll tell you, oh, this overnight success. But it's hilarious because oftentimes I'm deep enough in the market now that I will know the founders of companies that are being written about, and it'll say, oh yeah, started in 2010, so-and-so's company has risen to success. And I'm like, yeah, they've been working on that since 2002. And you just skip the first 8 years to write a better story, right? Because who wants to read a story about so-and-so struggled for 10 years and then, then they went through. Like, if you're in a desk job somewhere, you want to read a story about an overnight success because that's more fascinating to you, and how, you could do it too, right? So realistically, it's 10 years. And if you are just, playing around with ideas and you're like, oh, these things could be cool, that's not going to be enough. Whatever you end up working on has to be something that you actually care about as a core value. And for example, like the quiz company that I run now, right, is a product for creating quizzes. And that sounds like, how the heck does that come back to a core value? Like, that seems so stupid. But in reality, what our quizzes allow people to do is facilitate conversations, because a quiz engages somebody online from like Facebook and then puts them into a category based on their personality or their score or the outcome. And then the company that created that quiz can have an actual conversation with the customer about their personality, about how they answer the questions. And oftentimes those questions are super personal, like, what's your morning routine, and what do you like the most? What do you look for in friends? Like, what do you care about most in other people? That kind of stuff. And that's facilitating real conversations. And I think that having more real conversations can quite literally solve all of the world's problems. Like, if people would actually talk to each other about what they think and why they think that way, we would stop there. Hate would go away, violence would stop, because the reason that we get into these situations where we're really angry with each other is because we don't understand each other. And so that is a very, very core value for me. And my company allows the facilitation of that. And I talk to clients that are like, I'm having the most real conversations with customers I've ever had because of this quiz. And that just really, really resonates with me. So taking it all the way back to an idea, is it something that you deeply care about? Because if it works, and especially if it works, you're going to be in it for 10 years. If it doesn't work, you're going to be in it for a few, and then you're going to move on. But that's still a few years, like not months, not weeks, years of time. And if the idea that you're running with is just something cool that you thought of, that's not going to stick it. Like, you're not going to stick it out for 10 years. Like, you're not going to care. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I love it, man. Josh, I do want to be mindful of the time here, but is there anything else you think is worth mentioning for people listening?
I would say that I think success is more about habits than skills or luck or any of those things. as I've come along this journey as an entrepreneur, the times when I have the most success, and this often takes over a year or more to play out, is when my life is on track. I have healthy habits. I'm in a good place spiritually. I'm pouring into relationships outside of work, and those things are all humming along. And I get into a good routine. Like right now, I'm waking up at 5 a.m. most mornings, and I'm exercising every single day, and spending as much time with family and friends as possible outside of work. And it's paying huge dividends in what I'm able to do while I'm at work. And I really think that you can achieve a lot just by working on yourself and working on those good habits, regardless of what the actual playing out of that is in your business. So I think there's so much that can be said about skills and timing and luck and all that stuff. But in the end, I actually think it comes down to good habits and being in the right place with your mindset.
Yeah, it's so refreshing to hear from the whole hustle mentality.
Yeah.
Cool, dude. Well, I've got some final questions to kind of wrap up with here. So just the first thing that comes to mind in a sentence or two is perfect. The first one is, what do you wish you'd been told earlier in your 20s?
Habits, honestly.
Gotcha. What is the biggest opportunity for quarter lifers today?
To realize that it's never too late to turn things around or to pursue what you are actually passionate about.
I love that. Josh, I've got one final question. Before I get to that, what's the best place for people to go to find out more about you and the business and just kind of learn more about what you've got going on?
Yeah, definitely. So my business is called Interact. The URL is tryinteract.com. So like try interact. And you can find me on Twitter at jhaynam, and I'm also on LinkedIn most of the time. Also linkedin.com/jhaynam. So that's where you can find me.
Perfect. And I'll link up all of that in the show notes. Before I get to the final question, Josh, I just want to take a second to acknowledge you for coming on today on your birthday and just sharing about what you've learned. And I think it's really refreshing, like I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, to hear how, the habits and looking after the other things besides work have really helped push you forwards. And just the grit and determination you've shown in growing your business when a lot of people probably would have thrown in the towel and said that it was not really worth pursuing. So yeah, man, hat off to you, and thank you so much for coming on the show. And the final question that I do have is, what one thing can listeners do this week to start creating their own quarter life comeback?
Pick one habit and implement it, whether it's eating healthier dinners or waking up earlier or running every day or talking to a friend every evening that you haven't talked to in a while. Pick one thing and start doing it every single day.
I love it. Josh Haynam, thank you so much for coming on the Quarter Life Comeback.
Yeah, thank you.
So there you have it, guys and girls. That wraps up episode 74 of the Quarter Life Comeback podcast. And a big thanks to Josh Haynam for coming on the show and sharing a bit about his story and his experience with entrepreneurship. I really enjoyed this one. And if you did too, please share it around with your friends on social media. Shoot me a tweet at Brian Tier and let me know your biggest takeaway. For me, it was the point Josh made about how entrepreneurship can be used as a way to enhance the other areas of your life, rather than being seen as this thing that causes a sacrifice to all other areas. And I really love that and encourage you really to instill those positive habits that make everything else seem way, way easier. As always, you can get the links and resources we mentioned in this episode at briantier.com/074. And make sure you head on over to quarterlifecomeback.com and subscribe to get updates of new episodes and more that I only share with subscribers. Thanks once again for joining me this week. And until next time, keep creating your quarter life comeback.
Thanks for listening to the Quarter Life Comeback. Get started today by visiting briantier.com.